So let's take a listen to what we started with.
7 come 11 on blackjack. We'll every night and day.
All right, and then here's where we're at now.
7 come 11 on blackjack. We'll every night and day. Ooh, she's...
What's up, friends? Welcome back to the Mix Academy. I'm David Glenn with themixacademy.com. Today, we're going to take a look at this brand new mix breakdown. We're talking drums. Before you go reach for an EQ, compressor, saturation, samples, today we're looking at the first step that comes before any of that, which is going to improve the quality of your use of any mixing tool. It's the phase coherency or phase relationship between all the drum mics. And that tool that we're going to use is Sound Radix's Auto Align. Incredible tool. I'm going to show you my exact process, and without any more blabbing, let's dive straight in. So here we have the raw drums, the files as they were sent to me. We've got a snare top. We don't have a snare bottom for this particular setup, but I'm going to go ahead and explain what I would do if I did have a snare bottom. For now, we're just going to the snare top. We're going to instantiate Sound Radix's Auto Align, and I'm going to send channel 1. We're going to lift up. I'm going to hit play. We're going to lift the noise floor here until we just get the transient. We don't want the stuff underneath. As you can see, we got a nice healthy transient. We're going to send from 1. Now we're going to go to our overheads. In this case, we've got a stereo pair of overheads. I'm going to split that into mono. You'll see why in a second. I'm going to delete the stereo pair, and I'm going to work with these individual left and right hits. We're also going to add auto align here. We sent from 1. So we send from 1 on the snare top. We're going to receive. We're sending the snare into the overheads. We want to get the best phase relationship featuring the snare, so we get that nice full-bodied sound on the snare, and we get a better center position from the snare in each of the overhead mics. So we receive from 1 here, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to hit play. Come out a little bit where we got something happening. And I'm just going to lift up above the noise floor there, and then we've got the snare, nice healthy transient. Now that I've set my noise floor and I've received from 1 snare top into the overhead left, I'm just going to copy that down to overhead right. And then it's as simple as this. On the overhead left, it's going to receive that signal from the snare top, and I'm going to have it detect for the sample amount that it's going to delay for the best phase coherency. It's also going to look at polarity, and if it needs to, it'll reverse the polarity on the overhead mic. So we're going to hit detect and hit play. Right on. You can even feel that spread. The second that it instantiated, or I keep saying that word, the second that it added, took away actually, delayed 121 samples, we get this spread of the overhead. So now let's do the same thing to overhead right, and then we'll listen with and without it. Right on. So it delayed that overhead right mic 147 samples. It looks like it retained the polarity. We didn't do any no phase flip, you probably heard. So we're good on the overheads. I'm going to move pretty quick because we got a lot to cover in this course. But overhead left, overhead right, the phase relationship there. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take and I'm going to commit. In Pro Tools, we can just right click and we can commit that processing. Before we do, I want to show you what it sounds like before and after the processing. So here is just the overheads and the snare before auto align. Actually, I'll have it on first, and then I'll bypass it so you can hear the difference. Woo! Tell you what, let's loop this little snare fill here. Okay, so this is going to be without it, and now I'm going to add it back in. You're going to feel the body of the snare come forward. I'll bypass it and re-engage it a couple times here. One more time, because that's a pretty significant difference. Let's go ahead and hit play without it, and then I'll put it back. Actually, let's put it in, and then we'll take it out. Oh, ugh. All right, we're moving on. We're keeping it. And here's what we're going to do. Now that I've corrected the overheads for the snare phase relationship, I'm going to right click on these overheads and I'm going to commit them. And then we'll just hide and make inactive the ones that we've got in the session right now. So once that's complete, we're going to move on and we're going to do a similar process, except now we're going to take these overheads that have been improved upon. Forgive the Pro Tools Beach Ball there from upgrading. I got an M1 Mac and it's been solid except for these annoying beach balls every 30 to 60 seconds. But all right, overheads. Now we're going to add auto align, except instead of this time receiving from one, we're actually going to send from one. We're done with the snare. Now I did say I would tell you what I would do if I had a snare bottom mic. If I had a snare bottom mic, I would do the exact same process that I did to the overheads to the snare bottom mic. So I'm going to send the snare channel 1 into receive channel 1 into a snare bottom mic and detect for whatever to give us the best phase relationship. And it's a lot of times going to reverse the polarity, which you may have just simply been told, hey, reverse the polarity on that snare bottom mic, check it against the snare top, it's good to go. But auto align is going to take it a step further and it's going to work with the delayed samples and whether or not it needs to reverse the polarity to give you an even better phase relationship. So moving on from that, let's take a look at the overheads. Now that we have these corrected overheads, we're going to send from one on overhead left, lift up for the noise floor a little bit. We don't need to go quite as much for this one. Then we're going to go and copy that down to overhead right, but I'm going to send from 2. So overhead left and overhead right are now going to be sending independently. Well, how do we know what to send it to? Well, it's a great question. If you're like me, you mix drummer's perspective. I don't like to be doing the air drums and be feeling like the hi-hat's on the right side. I'm a right-handed drummer, and so I like to feel that hat when I'm mixing on the left side. If you're doing an audience perspective, you would do the opposite of what I'm going to show you here in this video. But we're going to go to Tom 1. If you had a hi-hat mic, a ride mic, you would do the same thing for them. In this case, we have 5 toms, a lot of toms. Usually only see 5 toms when I'm mixing gospel, but we've got some classic rock, some southern rock going on here, and we've got 5 toms. So we're going to throw auto align on here. And because drummer's perspective, Tom 1, whoop, you can see is pan to the left, I'm going to receive from the left overhead, which I sent from channel 1. Now I'm going to do that same thing for Tom 2. And then we're going to change it up for toms 3, 4, and 5 because those are going to be off to the right. So we're going to receive from channel 2, which is our right overhead. So we're going to phase align the toms according to where they're panned against the overheads, left or right. And so then we've got Tom 4 and Tom 5 that are also panned to the right, so they're going to use this one over here. Now I should have set the noise floor here. Let's go ahead and pull that back up. We'll go ahead and solo all the toms. Let's go find us a tom fill. There's one out here, and we're going to take a look at the noise floor. So we'll lift that up just above the transient for each, and that should do us nice. There's that beach ball again. Say hello to my friends at the Avid support. Got to get that new update coming to us. So here's Tom 2. We're going to do the same thing. So yep, we're going to just copy that down. We'll do what we already did again, except this time we're receiving from channel 2. Now we can copy that one and double check. We're good. Now we're going to hit detect. We're going to find a fill where there's actually something happening. And so Tom 1, you can see we got a fill right there. We can hit detect and play. Now you can see we didn't have much time. You just had the fill right away and then all that space afterwards. If you have a section in the song with some toms where there's a full-on tom arrangement happening, where there's a lot of tom action going on, you want to go there when you're setting this auto align. But I typically just find a spot where there's a tom hit and it's going to do the best that it can. It does a great job. So now moving on from Tom 1, we're going to Tom 2. Same thing, we got a fill right there, so we're good to hit detect. We've got our sample delay. I'll go ahead and solo the overheads here so we can hear that as they do its thing here. So Tom 3. Okay, and then now you'll notice there's not a Tom 4 hit right there. I got to scroll out a little further for this one, but let's pull that Tom 4 up and A little extra rumble on that. Last tom, tom 5. Sounds like a dual floor tom setup there, floor tom 1 and 2. I love it. And now we've got that all done. Again, if I had a hi-hat and a ride mic, I would do the exact same thing. Drummer's perspective, my hi-hat goes to the left, so I would use overhead left to send into the hi-hat, and then my ride cymbal would be on the right, and I would send overhead right into the ride cymbal. Other way around, actually. I would send the ride cymbal into overhead right, and it's going to detect the best phase relationship. So now that we've done all of this work, what can we do to, let's do a little example. So now that I've got the overheads taken care of, hat ride, if we had it, would be taken care of at this point. I'm going to take, because we're sending from the overheads, there's nothing that auto align is doing on overhead left or right to impact these. I'm going to go ahead and take these off, and we're going to take the overheads as a pair and move them up back to this stereo. I like to, for my kick, you guys are probably thinking, what about the kick? Yeah, we're not going to forget the kick, trust me. Let's go here. We got auto align. We're going to send 1. We're going to set our noise floor. Make sure we get the kick hits in there, okay? And then now sending from there, we're going up to our kick track. We're going to do auto align. Same process. We're going to receive from 1. And woo, there we go. And now we have it. So let's hit detect and figure out what the best phase relationship is between the kick and the overheads. All right, and so we got the samples delayed at 209. Now, something you got to keep an eye out for, an ear out for with phase is sometimes similar to flipping the phase or inverting the polarity with mics, so you get your kick in, your kick out, or your snare to your overheads. If you just invert the polarity or flip the phase, they call it, you may hear a clear difference where you gain bottom in your sound, be it your snare, your kick, what have you. Or you may hear it get worse, so you may hear it get thinner. Then you know it's not in good phase, it's out of phase. And so you want the most bottom in possible. Now, sometimes it's not that simple. Sometimes you're going to get it to where you invert the polarity or you use auto align, and it doesn't necessarily give you more bottom in. It just shifts the bottom in response. And so that's what I feel like we have here with the kick. We went from some deep subs to a little bit more of a punchy sub kind of vibe. So instead of that 30 to 50, 60 hertz thing rumbling down deep, it's giving us a little more of that kind of 70 to 100 hertz vibe. So let's take a listen to just the kick with it and without it, and let's see if we want to keep this or not. I can clearly hear that we have a tighter, punchier kick when we stick with what auto align did here by the 209 samples, and looks like we even reverse the polarity on it. So I prefer that. You may prefer that deeper, subbier kick, but I'm thinking this punchy kick is going to work out better for this song, so we're going to keep it. But something to keep in mind, that it's not always just black and white. There's going to be some gray area, and you're going to have to use your creative judgment to decide what's best for the song. So there we go. Moving on from that, let's take a listen to, tell you what, I'm going to import the original sounds, and we're going to listen to what they were before and after. I would, however, go ahead and my assistant would go ahead and commit this. So you would commit the kick as it was. I'll do that for the toms. We'll come back and we'll take a look at what they all sound like before and after auto align. All right, so here's what I've done. I've imported the original kick, snare, all the toms, and the overheads here that we were sent from the client. And then we've also got our committed tracks that we used auto align to correct the phase coherency between each individual set of tracks. So now let's take a listen. I'm first going to play the corrected sound. Listen particularly for the kick and the snare and the warmth, the meat down the middle. You're going to really feel that. And then, of course, the stereo spread has improved drastically. But I'm going to hit play. You be the judge, and tell me what you think in the comments down below. Here are the corrected phase coherence drums. snare almost disappears. So there is the power of adjusting phase coherency. Now, if you want to see this done manually, let me know in the comments down below. You can, of course, take and go track by track. We can show that off, but for the sake of moving forward with this mix breakdown, we're going to talk about why I chose to blend a kick. We're going to talk about why I chose to blend a handful of snares very gently, nothing too overpowering, and a couple of tricks that I use to make sure that when you use multiple snare samples, you don't get too much transient. So we'll take a look at that in a future video. And then, of course, we're going to take a look at why I chose not to replace the toms and to go with the originals. All kinds of stuff to come in this mix breakdown. I want to give a shout out to Vital Sign, my man Steve Azevedo, for sharing the tracks with me. This is part of a service that he hired me to create a mix for this and then provide him a mix template. If you want to learn more about any of my courses, any of my services, my mixing services, anything at all, check it out. Link in the description. This week we're running 20% off Path to Pro for those of you who want to get in and learn the steps to developing a professional mix. We're turning average or even poor recordings into hit records in the Mix Academy's Path to Pro. Check it out. Link in the description below, and we'll see you in the next one.